Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back if you are a current subscriber. I certainly appreciate that. For those that are new, I typically do a lot of videos on streaming audio for role-playing games, how to do that, and what are the best options. So that's a lot of what I do. I also do playthroughs. I do a lot on Fantasy Grounds, Unity, although recently, because I've had challenges getting a group together, I've been getting more into solo role-playing games. So that's what brings us here today. So my favorite genre, if you will, is horror. I've been a horror fan from a very early age, and some of the games like Shadow of the Demon Lord, I've really enjoyed. I don't get to play it as much as I'd like, but I really like that type of system. So as I was starting to get into solo role playing games, I was looking at a lot of the different indie publishers, and I came across Black Oath Entertainment. And Black Oath Entertainment is also Alex T is the lead individual behind Black Oath Entertainment, and also Alan Barr. And he is so prolific. He's based in Madrid, Spain. He has created a ton of games. I'll put a link to the Drive-Thru RPG site so you can find him and all of his various products. He's done a number of successful Kickstarters, as I understand it. I found him after his Kickstarters. I think he has another one coming up that I will probably partake in. We'll have to see exactly what it's about. But what I'm here today to talk about is Under Ashen Skies. And a couple of things before I jump in. One, this is going to be a long video. I plan to do a pretty deep walkthrough. I have not seen much content on Under Ashen Skies. I have a couple of videos, character creation, and using some digital tools to play Under Ashen Skies. But Grim Jim, I found his video. I would encourage you to check his site out. And he has a video to review Under Ashen Skies. But I didn't see a really in-depth review and just go through the entire system. So I plan to do a lot of that today. I will try not to do a lot of spoilers, but I am going to be flipping through in detail. So as I timestamp, I'll try to make it clear, like when we're going to get into things like NPCs or monsters that maybe you don't want to see. So I'll try to do that as best I can, but certainly no promises. A couple other things, although I am active on Alex's Discord, and he has given me a couple of PDFs for other games, just as I've gotten more into his games and done a number of videos. This is by no means sponsored. I purchased Under Ashen Skies, the hardback. I purchased the PDF. So certainly all these thoughts are my own, and this is not sponsored in any way. Final caveat is I don't do a lot of video editing. In fact, I do none. So kind of what you see is what you get. If I make mistakes, I'm just going to keep going. And I apologize in advance if it's not the most professional quality, but this is what you get as far as the video. Hopefully the audio is pretty good, but as far as the video. So let's jump into Under Ashen Skies and what is it? I'm not sure if this is a term that others use. It probably is. I'm sure I'm not creating it. But what I like to consider Under Ashen Skies is discovery horror. So to me, it's more about the discovery of your character and learning about the world and where you are and who you are. And there's no winning the game, as I understand it. At least there might be a secret ending, I'm told, but there really is no winning. Like you're in it really to engage with the world and understand understand like who you are, where you are, what's happened. So if that type of genre appeals to you, then I would encourage you to keep watching. If not, I totally understand. Now, I don't want to spoil the introduction, so I'm gonna start page flipping in a second. But there is a pretty detailed introduction that I think is probably better if you just read it yourself. I think on my character creation, I do read it, but I'm very clear there's a spoiler in advance. So if you do want to see that, go there. But what I would say is that I feel like this is somewhat like I Am Legend meets Silent Hill and Memento. And if you don't know what those mean, I'm sure you know Silent Hill. But if you haven't heard of, say, Memento, I would encourage you to check it out. It's a relatively old, I guess, movie. I don't remember if it was 80s or 90s. but really cool about a guy who's completely lost his memory and he slowly gets it back through the course. Well, not really gets it back, but you have to watch it because it's really done very interesting, and I don't want to spoil it for you. So I would encourage you to check it out. Now, Alex T, he cites his inspiration with things including Hellraiser, Silent Hill, the Orphic Mysteries, and also the works of Junji Ito, a Japanese horror artist. Now, I apologize if I'm butchering that name, but I was looking at Alex's website, Black Oath Entertainment, and that's what he cites as his inspiration. So enough of the intro. I'll put a timestamp in the video that the actual review starts here. So thanks for watching so far. All right, so here's the cover, and then you see Alan Barr and Alex T. So we will flip through, and here's the table of contents. So there is a little bit, some of them are dark pages with dark background with white lettering, and others are the opposite. But it kind of gives you a feel for what you're getting into as you first look at this. You see a candle, and even the headings are not typical. It's not, hey, here's your character creation. It's, they talk about things like abysmal loss and purpose found, personal growth and the search for the self. So you can kind of tell it's a little different feel right as you get into the table of contents. I don't want to click on these because I don't want to pop around. I'm already going to be popping around a lot in this video, but these are all links. So you can link and click directly to the section you want to go. I feel like not all PDFs do that, and I'm always happy when that happens, because to me, sometimes I want to get into the PDF and be able to click on exactly where I want to go. So that's kind of a nice start for me. One thing I would make clear as you look at the art, and Grim Jim pointed this out in his video, I think he thought some of the art might be AI. Alex T did comment on that video and was very clear that, look, there's no AI in this. But for those of you that care about whether or not AI is used, Alex T says there is no AI. There's a lot of photo bashing and digital manipulation. I assume I don't profess to know much about graphic design. I suspect that's just, mashing up different images and things of that nature. But again, no AI if that's important to you. Okay, this is the section I'm going to flip past. So I apologize for doing that very quickly, but that was the intro. It's about a page and a little more than a page and a half. And without spoiling too much, you're somewhat like waking up. You're not sure where you are, who you are. So again, it's a lot about discovery. I like this image. This reminds me of kind of not so much, I guess, war-torn, because there's not a lot of, it doesn't look like anything is like bombed out or destroyed, but it's just dark and gritty and just looks like I Am Legend is actually, there's another image in here that really reminds me of I Am Legend that we'll get to. So this is kind of the first page, if you will. And this talks about a little bit more about the background of the game. So it mentions that you awaken in a world of darkness, loss, and horror. You don't have memories of who you are. And that's a theme as we get into the game. And as we page flip here, you're going to hear more and more. A lot of this is about discovering through memories as you level up and your character starts slowly unraveling who they are. Now, I will be very clear. I have not read many of the tables at all. I don't want to spoil that for myself either. So I've looked at them enough to know they're detailed, and I think really cool. So I love the evocative nature of them. I did a one session playthrough, and I'll make sure to link that in the video here. I'll put a card up, and then I'll also link that in the description below. So really all you need, like many of the solo RPGs out there, is pen, paper, some dice, and you can dive into the story. As we go through here, I will mention I'm much more of a digital player, and the main reason being, one, I like to stream, and it's a little bit easier for me with my setup to stream with digital tools. And two, although I have a fair bit of space in my house, I also have a wife, two teenage daughters, and taking up an entire table with games and physical components just isn't in the cards. So I tend to try to create digital tools. And when I can, I try to release those for free for others to be able to use them. So again, I'll get to those a little bit later. So this game takes place in the town of Riverside, and all you really know is it's a small town on the East Coast. And it is, you don't really know this. Well, I guess you do know it as you start exploring, but you don't know why, but the town is deserted. And there are some inhabitants left that you'll get into, but things have been twisted and transformed, and it really takes a toll on your sanity. All right. So again, we've gotten past the what I would consider more of the spoiler intro, but this does, as you flip through here, you do wake up in an apartment, roughly you think the 21st century. It's very confusing, and as you exit your apartment, you start dealing immediately with one of the sections of this town, your apartment block. And as you get past that, one of the things it talks about here is that there's a blanket of ash that's falling. There's a movie that comes to mind that I just can't think of what it is, but where there's just a slight tinge of ash, and I can just picture dark and gritty, and maybe you don't see the sun a lot, and this kind of thin coat of ash and soot is just everywhere. So as you start looking at the rules, relatively simple. The core mechanic is a D20. And for the most part, and I'll mention this as I get into skill checks and what have you, but for the most part, you are rolling a D20, and if you get a result of a 20 or more, you succeed. So in that respect, it reminds me a bit of Shadow of the Demon Lord, where all of your checks, except for combat, but all of your checks, you're just trying to pass a 10. So I kind of like that. Makes it pretty simple. You're going to use a number of different dice: a D20, D10, D100. So whether you have a D100 or a tens die and a single die, you can use that. You'll roll on some percentile rolls. You'll roll on some 6-sided dice. Now, this is probably a good place, as you see at the bottom, to make sure that I do give the disclaimer that this does have very mature themes. There are some things that I'll point out as I move along, and I suppose, like any game, everything is optional, right? You can make this, it's a solo game. You can make it whatever you want. You can keep rules, you can throw out rules. If, that's something that I've tried to learn as I've gotten into solo RPGs, that, a lot of times I fall into the trap of like, well, wait, what do you do here? And I really want to know the rule. And it's nice to know what the author was thinking, but in many cases, do what I would, at least the advice I would give you is do what feels right for you in your game. Right. I mean, it's great. Alex will respond on his Discord with answers and what have you. So I think that's awesome to have an author that's engaged, but kind of make it your own. Back to my disclaimer. This is very dark. So if you do have mental health challenges, if you have things that will make you very uncomfortable with dark violence, body horror, psychological, please, you might want to stop here, right? And this might not be the game for you. This is something I really enjoy, but it will not be for everyone. And please, if that's something that you do not enjoy and something that triggers you, you probably want to move on and stop the video here. But if you do enjoy this for whatever reason, like I do, I've always, as I said, been a horror fan. Keep reading. The authors are making it clear that, look, they're trying to do this to explore and provoke and ask questions about the darker side of human nature. It's not just, frivolous is the point. So enough of that. Move forward. Here we go. I like these images. To me, I don't even know how to describe this. I can't tell if his mind's exploding, is losing his he or she. Looks, I think he, but a little bit androgynous. But, what's happening to this person? Are they deep in thought? And that's just, their mind going in a number of directions. But I love the evocative nature of this art. This is the image that reminds me of I Am Legend. I think of like Will Smith walking in the street in kind of this bombed out or, just destroyed town. This image kind of hooked me when I first found the game. So this is really the start. If you're thinking of maybe a typical RPG, this is where we're starting to get into character creation, right? So the title of Personal Growth and the Search for the Self. But this is where you would start with character creation. I've done my own little highlighting here just so I don't forget to talk to you about some of the things that I thought were either unique or I wanted to point out. The attributes, they're going to be, if you've played any form of D&D or Pathfinder or really any game, these stats attributes will seem very, very familiar with you. So I'm going to gloss over those. What I will say is your attributes start at 10. They can range from 1 to 18. And again, if you're doing an attribute test, you're going to roll a d20. And if you get equal to or greater than a 20, you'll succeed. Secondary attributes include fate. I really enjoy this. And so as I've gotten into a little bit more into solo games, I feel like this is a good way. In this case, what it does is allow you to spend a fate point to reroll any roll. So that helps me maybe create a little more powerful character, or at least can affect some things and not just be stuck. If you roll something in a solo game, sometimes you can really be challenged if your rolls are bad. So you start with 5 fate, and you might gain more as you progress during gameplay. One thing, before I move forward with the skills, one thing I would say is I enjoy this, and I'll get to this at the very end. I'll go through pros, cons, and sum up the video, but you do not, at least in my view, there's not a lot of custom character creation at the beginning. I think you learn more as you go. You will be able, as you level up, to add some things, and I'll get to those as we flip through the PDF. But if you're really big on, hey, I want to know my character, I want to create this specific type of character, again, this may not be the game for you. But if you are interested in hey, I want to discover, this is cool, I want to learn about my character, I don't know who I am, I can role play that a bit as I get through the game. To me, that really appeals to me. And if it appeals to you, I would say, again, maybe keep watching this video, because this might be interesting to you. So you start with 10 for everything. So again, you're not rolling, you're not putting, hey, I want a high strength, I want a high charisma, whatever. So you start with 10s across the board. All right, some of the other secondary attributes talked about fate. You have stamina, which is your action economy. So as we get into combat and what have you, we'll explore that a bit more, but you start with 10 points of stamina. And again, you'll be able to use those for attacking, for defending, stealthy, or maybe not being stealthy, but a number of things on that front. Trauma is important in this game. So you're going to be suffering through visions and nightmares and twisted images and all kinds of things. And you're not prepared for that, right? So trauma is the way you're going to track that in trauma points. What you need to know at the outset is you start at 0. If you ever reach 100, what it says is you will crack, finally succumbing to the nightmare around you. I don't know yet, and we might learn as we flip through this together. But if that means, do you die? Do you just become insane? Do you have to roll on a table? We'll have to explore that. So wounds, think about wounds as your health. Normally, you can suffer a maximum of 3 wounds. It says at once before dying. So we'll get through that a little bit more again, but I do believe it's basically those are your hit points. So 3 wounds, and once you get through those 3 wounds, you die, but death is not always the end, and we'll get to that. Skills. So there's 11 different skills, and you range from 0 or complete incompetence to total mastery at 15. So obviously, if you have a 15, you only need to roll a 5 or above on a d20 to succeed on your roll. So during character creation, you have 50 points. So you do have some ability to customize your character a bit in terms of what they're going to be more skillful in. And it does have an example array. So if you don't want to think about 50 points, and you can only spend up to 10 points on every skill. So you can't load a skill and have a 15 at the very start. So you could add, say, up to 10. If you want, you can use this array, and this array shows 7 different pluses or 7 different numbers that add up to 50. So you can do this how you want. You can do 5 across 10 different skills, whatever you want. But these are relatively self-explanatory, but crafting. So there is a cool crafting mechanic we'll talk through. First aid. So after a battle, you are given the ability to try to stitch yourself up. Now, you will need some supplies, medical supplies, to do that, but this will give you a better opportunity to succeed. Lockpicking, melee combat, perception, understanding the world around you, and I believe that comes into play on initiative. Persuasion, so you will run into NPCs in this game. And persuasion will help you a little bit more of like a charisma stat, right? It will allow you to engage with them more, and they may not necessarily immediately be combative with you. The ranged combat skill, so you could find guns and pistols and rifles and all sorts of things. This is a modern RPG. Resolve, so that's more about being able to fend off some of the traumatic experiences, and scavenging. So trying to find any resource you can as you're investigating the town of Riverside. All right, and then sneaking, obvious, so that can be important. You do have the ability to potentially use sneaking to be cautious when you're entering in a room and avoid potential combat. And then technology. It sounds like you might encounter computers, other types of electronics. So improving your character. So during the game, the way that you accrue what is typically XP is in the form of neme. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it throughout this video. So if you gather enough of it, you're going to be able to uncover more of the puzzle, your memories of, what's potentially what's happening, but definitely your memories. So once you've accrued 100 neme, you may choose to increase your level by 1. And then if you do that, it will grant you a role in the memories table and either 1 additional attribute point that you can distribute where you want, or 2 skill points. Okay, but it does mention that aside from being spent directly to level up, you can spend neme on other items. I don't know what those are yet. I don't recall, but we'll get to them as we page through. So memories, when you acquire a new memory, you can write it down on your piece of paper or however you're tracking it. And I will show you as we get later in the video, a PDF form fillable character sheet. I took the PDF that Alex gives you when you buy the game with a character sheet. It's on his website and you can get that for free. I created or changed that into a form fillable sheet that I'll show towards the end of the video. So when you roll on memory table, you're going to roll on 3 different potential tables: childhood memories, loved one, and mundane. I am going to skip through the tables because I do not want to preview them and really give you any spoilers. So obviously you can probably pause if you really wanted to, but let's flip through here. But know that that's a lot of, as you level up, you uncover more and more about yourself. And one of the things that I find interesting is that although you don't have any recollection of who you are to begin with, and you might not be the person you think you are, and you might discover that you might have some terrible, disgusting, upsetting things in your past that may not make you love your character. So again, keep that in mind as you think about, is this a game that you're interested in? All right, so you can, as I flip through here, just notice the volume, and there's several sentences on each table, right? And these are each of the 3 different types of tables. So there's a ton of things to discover as you play through Under Ashen Skies. All right, dark secrets. So sometimes as you roll on those memory tables we just scrolled through, you will be requested to roll or directed to roll on a dark secrets table. And this is again one that I guess you can read them since I have this up right now. I'm not reading them. I'm looking away. But these are not pleasant memories. And the author, Alex, does mention that, look, some readers may prefer to ignore these altogether. So something to keep in mind again. And even further from this, for those that want even more extreme content, and I don't know what all of those themes are, but there's an alternative darker secrets table at the back. You can kind of really do as much or as little. I mean, I'm sure there's still going to be some things that are disturbing, even if you don't use the dark or the darker secrets, but you can certainly tailor this a bit if it gets too much for you. All right, so let's scroll past the darker secrets and we're going to go to talents. So talents are like unique skills and abilities, and you only get 5 of these. I don't think you get these as you level up. I think they're more discovered and learned. Not quite sure, because I don't remember as we flipped through and we talked about progression. I know you can add an attribute or you can add skill points. Sorry, attribute points or skill points, but I think talents you discover and earn. And some of them, as you look at the top right of this page up here, it does say the most common way is via the site exploration track and by defeating your nemesis, which we will get to. You will also sooner or later acquire some negative traits. So you do have the ability to forfeit a talent in order to get rid of a negative trait. Here are some of the talents. I don't feel like this is super spoilery. So I think, I don't know if you have the potential to pick and or roll, but again, it's your game. Do what you want. If you want to roll on it, if something looks really interesting to you and you want to take it instead, I doubt it's going to break the game, right? But a lot of talents here that will allow you to customize your player character a little bit more. Again, another interesting image at the bottom. Okay, of the broken world and the rules to navigate it. So now that we've got a bit about our character, you can start your gaming session. So this, just a little more, I won't go through all of these, but talked about attribute checks. So in general, 20 or higher, skill checks will be the same. There may be things that you get into in the game that you're not sure what really applies, and it might not specifically fit. Do what you think is right. You know, if you think it's strength or con, use those. But just as most, in my opinion, most good authors state, use common sense and don't let it slow down the action in the story. So don't worry about looking up, oh my gosh, I got to spend 20 minutes looking for which skill. Just pick it and move on and keep going with your story. It's as you get through Under Ashen Skies, you can play co-op. This is mostly solo, but I do think if you have an NPC, it's possible, I think, that they can help you with skill checks. So that's what I believe assisting is. And opposed checks are the obvious. There are times when you will do an opposed check against a NPC or a monster. Recovery checks, probably similar in nature to attribute checks and others. Advantage and disadvantage. For those of you that play 5e, it's going to be the typical, you roll 2d20s for advantage, take the highest result or the more favorable, and disadvantage is the opposite. Difficulty, you do have the ability yourself, I suppose, to increase or decrease and modify your rolls. Critical success and failures, and there are, at least on combat, I know there are some specific outcomes related to that. Natural 1 is going to be a critical failure. A natural 20 is going to be a critical success. Combat. So we're going to get into this and we'll talk about initiative, turns, and rounds, but let's get into that as we move on to the next couple pages. So stamina. So we talked about that on the front end. You start with 10 stamina to spend every round. And the black call out box, mentions how you might track it however you want, whether it's digitally, whether it's, with a physical mechanic, if you're playing with, props in front of you, but just know that you have 10 stamina points to use. So you can move a distance of 5 meters once per round. This doesn't strike me as a game that's super specific, like, oh my gosh, you have to make sure you're plotting everything out. I think it's a little more theater of the mind. There are maps, and when you download the game, I might not show them here, but there are maps as you buy the game that will come with the PDF, and you'll be able to use. You can print them out, you can use them digitally, what have you, but there are maps that you'll be able to use. So you can move 5 meters per round, and you can move before or after you take all your actions. You can move twice, or I suppose like dash in the 5e world, and you can forfeit your action to move an extra 5 meters. You can be cautious. So if you enter a room and you're trying to be careful, you can do a stealth check, and then you're going to be doing that roll as an opposed check against your enemy's awareness. And as we show enemies briefly, you'll see that they have an awareness score. And when you do that, if you win that one-on-one opposed check, you can do two things. You can avoid combat, move along, leaving the room. You won't then be able to discover what's all in the room. I suppose you could come back later, or you can initiate combat. You would gain initiative and you automatically hit with your first attack. Now, because maintaining caution does cost 5 stamina per round, the attack's usually going to be faster than normal. That's something to pay attention to, that you can maintain stealth, but it's going to cost you 5 stamina per round. You only have 10. Let's keep flipping down. Stamina costs, little table down here. So you can see a standard attack is 5 stamina. A heavy attack can only be used with a certain type of weapon, 8 stamina. You can use some defensive maneuvers, which is important because you do not start with any armor and you have 0 defense. So that means when you are attacked, if you do not do anything to avoid that attack or spend any stamina, you are going to automatically be hit. And if you recall from the beginning of this video, you've got 3 wounds. So that is a pretty difficult price to pay. Encounter reaction. So when initiative's been determined and you've entered a room, the next step is to determine how the enemies or threats will respond to you. So there's basically an 80% chance that the creature is aggressive and attack, 1 through 8. 9 or a 10, the creature, for whatever reason, ignores you and wanders out of the room. Now, there are some modifications, and you'll see as we continue to go through here, this game is pretty detailed. So if you like that and you like the grit, you like a lot of tracking, you like that there are modifications, things that happen. Again, this is probably a game you'll be interested in. If you're a little bit, if it's a little daunting to you that there is a lot of tracking, then this might be one that you do a little bit later, especially if you're brand new to solo role playing. I think this is an awesome game, but for those that are just dipping their toe in the waters, this may not be the best very first game for you because there is a lot to it. All right, getting into combat. So the meat of the combat is the meat of the conflict. Combat is listed as we go through here. So attacking, you roll a d20. And if it's a melee, close combat skill. If it's ranged, use the ranged combat skill. And you're going to compare that to the defender's defense attribute. And if the attack equals or exceeds the defense, you hit. If the defender has no defense, then the attack hits. And if the attacker is cautious or the enemy is unaware of the attacker, the attack automatically hits. Damage is interesting. You roll a d3 and then you check the results below, and the defender makes a choice. I don't know if it tells you what the creature will do, so I'll probably play that. Like, if I think it's an intelligent creature, maybe they'll take a wound or a condition before a wound, or I'll have to read and see if it says anything more about what the creature will do. But you can take a wound or a condition, and it lists those down here. And if the attack was a heavy attack with a powerful weapon, you add a +1 to your d3 roll. So again, more detail on that here. Gaining defense. So this is where it mentions, as you have no defense, you might want to gain some. And here are some of the actions you can take. So taking cover is 5 stamina. So you can duck behind something, and it sounds like move away. I don't believe this is part of your move because it is listed as an action. So I think you have your 5-meter move, and then if you take cover, that would entail, hey, you're kind of jumping out of the way and moving 5 meters, as I read that. You can evade, which is only 1 stamina, and that at least allows you to do a dex check against the enemy's attack. You might have armor, and then this talks a bit more about the enemy's actions and that they'll always attempt to attack those who harmed them last. Conditions, again, I would just have you read through here. Some of these do persist, I believe. And there may be a certain number of rounds. You can become entangled, exhausted. And there are other things that can affect your checks. If you get too much trauma, if there's a lot of things, as you get wounds, and that might have, let me flip back up 1 second. I thought it said up here, maybe it's later when we talk about wounds. I think there might be another section, but I believe as you gain wounds, you do start getting reductions or penalties to your checks, but let's see if we find that later. So here, again, all the conditions. So let's keep going through this. Poisons, infected, knocked down, and being prone. There are additional combat rules around throwing explosives, overwatch, which means when you're wielding a weapon, you can delay your action until the enemy gets in line of sight. So to me, it's kind of like holding your action, basically, right? Like I'm going to hold it, and when the creature pops out, I will attack him. Desperate attack. So if you're just like, God, I've got to hit this thing on this round, you can do it, but you would have no defense score against the next attack. I guess I would read that to mean that, at least I would play it probably, that I can't use one of those additional like evades and things with my stamina, because otherwise, as I read this, I have no defense, so there would be no penalty at all for me to just use a desperate attack every time. So I think I would interpret this as saying, hey, you can't use your stamina to do some of those other defensive maneuvers because you've just sold all out on your attack. You can disengage from combat. There are some, again, these are more, I think, more optional. It looks, yeah, it even says optional. So there's some random combat events that you can make. There's critical hits and misses and tables around that can cause you, even more grittiness to the combat. The wounds and injuries. So during combat, every time you receive a non-fatal wound, so you can, that is, if they can sustain more than one wound, then you suffer a -2 to all actions and must roll on the injuries table. So that is, wow, that's pretty rough. So you roll on a table to determine the nature of the injury and whether it's a critical injury and what that does. But so as I read that, yeah, each time a character receives a non-fatal wound, and what they're saying is, like, if you only have one wound, it's going to be fatal if you get the one wound. But otherwise, you get a cumulative -2 to all actions. So once combat's over, you can try to treat your wound by virtue of a roll and do a medicine check. And when you receive damage out of combat, like a trap or something that happens, you automatically receive a wound. Falling is one wound for every 6 meters of height. So that seems pretty standard for D&D type games. Injuries. So this talks about all the impacts of different injuries and where you were hit. Critical injuries. So let's talk about death for a minute. I find this, the mechanic, I'm not saying the game is, but the mechanic reminds me of some of the computer games, right? Where it does say death comes often and swiftly, and each time you roll, you must roll on the death table. So you have a 20% chance of your soul is lost forever. You're gone, game over. So if you roll a 1 or a 2 on a D10. 3 to a 9, you are going to lose the last memory you gained. So you have some mechanic effect, but you can keep playing. You're back at your apartment, and as I understand it, you basically kind of respawn. And if you get a 10, it's all actually improved you somehow. So interesting to me, and again, I like that from a solo role-play game, that you don't necessarily die, but you still have the potential, right? Like, it still gives me that sense of, hey, this isn't just, I can play through this without any consequence. Privation. So this talks about what happens. You need to eat. You need to make sure you're tracking that, and what happens if you're not eating enough food. Traps. So you might encounter some traps as you explore rooms, and there's certain consequences around those. We talked a bit about trauma. Now, this does talk a little bit more about what happens with trauma. So you can have a maximum of 100, and this does say at which point you are lost and considered dead. So I don't know if that means you roll on the dead table, or if you get 100 trauma, you're just outright dead. I'll have to think about that as I play. And each time you gain 10 trauma, so as you tick up, you get to 10 to 20 to 30, you break down and you must roll on the trauma table. And as you do that, you gain a cumulative -1 to all skills. And all the results on the trauma table imply a reduction of skills. So there's other things that happen. But there are ways for you to, with your resolve skill, and I think maybe some other ways, to slow down the trauma challenges. So this talks about how you can gain trauma. And I did highlight here that one of the ways you can gain trauma is, like, if you lack a light source, that will cause 1 trauma per combat round or 1 trauma per room explored. So that's going to be important. There are other things you can recover from trauma, and you'll see here, and we haven't talked about these yet, so we'll get to those in a bit. But if you kill a Phonos or a Make or certain other events, then it will decrease your trauma to some degree. Phonos and Make are types of creatures and monsters and or bosses you'll encounter as you go through Under Ashen Skies. Negative traits, let's keep, so tracking time. So again, as I mentioned, and I have several times, there's a fair bit to track in this game. So there is a time tracker. We'll show it on the character sheet. This shows it here a bit, but basically you are going to have to track time as you're walking through the town of Riverside. If you're being stealthy, it does move you forward further on the time track. And there are events and things that can happen by virtue of you moving forward on the time track. So it is important as you move through sites, as you explore things. Again, you're going to move further and further on the time track. There is an error in the PDF that Alex has mentioned on other places, but if you look at this image, it looks like as you're on this time track, you have to light a torch or change a battery 3 times on this track. Alex has clarified that you really do it once per cycle. You can probably decide, is it the beginning of the cycle, toward the end, but you really only need to worry about changing your battery or lighting your torch if you have one once per cycle. So let's see, day tracking. So each 10 cycles equals a day. So you're going to go through, and there's a tracker on the PDF, but as you go through 10 complete cycles, then you are through a complete day. And as a newly created character, you start on a Monday. Why is that important? Because each day of the week is presided over by what's called a protogenoi. See if I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But each protogenos has a neutral aspect, negative aspect, and a positive aspect. I am not going to try to pronounce the parenthetical, but you roll a d10 at the start of each day to determine what impact does it have. So again, another mechanic, which is cool, but a lot more tracking. So you can see on a Monday, who is that protogenoi and what is the impact or effect as you're walking through that day and do 10 complete cycles. Maybe you gain fate points, you lose, maybe you lose or gain rations. So these are all the impacts that would happen by day. Emotions. So this is another, I guess everything's optional, but Alex even points out that this may be a bit too much as you're just starting to learn Under Ashen Skies. But so he even suggests for new players to ignore these rules until you're more comfortable with the game. But what happens is basically your emotional state, in addition to trauma, your emotional state can go up or down based on you failing or I guess passing will checks. And as you get further on the spectrum, positive or negative, it looks like there are specific impacts to that. So if you become hopeless, you have a -2 to all skills and +1 damage. I don't know if that means that you take a wound. I'll have to look at that later, but just know this is another further ability to customize and make this game even more challenging, I suppose. Tracking gear. So you do have a number of slots. You begin the game with a sports bag, and there's a mechanic on how many spots and spaces you take up. You do have, again, I would point to similarities with video games. You have a home base. So your apartment is a home base, and you do have the ability to go back to that apartment when you want, and you can kind of regroup. You can craft things in your apartment. You can store things in your apartment. So again, kind of an interesting, almost like a save point to some degree, just like a video game. Playing with a friend. So there's some basic comments about playing with a friend, but this is mostly designed for solo play. All right, we're about halfway through. I know this is long. God, I love these images though. All right, exploring and shifting reality. So this is where we get a little bit more into the gameplay. And there are some, again, on Alex's website, Black Oath Entertainment, as well as the downloads that you will get if you buy the PDF. You'll get some playing aids and some things that'll help you to remember some of these things. But this goes through the gameplay steps. You're going to choose in the beginning, you're going to start at your apartment and explore that that apartment block. And there are 5 different sites that you're going to explore, and you're going to explore them multiple times. You're going to explore Brooks High School, Riverside University, Governor's Palace, apartment block, and then Bosch Gardens. 4 of these actually have maps, and they have 2 different types of maps. And I'll talk about that and as to why would you need that as we get through the next few pages. But you're going to travel to your site. If you see that little plus and that little time clock, that means you're advancing time by 1 on your time tracker. You're going to determine the cold factor, which we'll talk about, which further impacts your ability to be successful, or at least your strength, I guess, in these situations. Determine the peril level. So how challenging is this going to be? Do you have ambush encounters? You're going to explore rooms. And then as you clear these sites, you will progress on an exploration track. You will also have to keep track of your nemesis and remember and keep track of supplies and ammo, investigation track, and what's called the devouring. We're going to get into all those shortly. So start at the apartment block is where you're going to begin. So I won't read all of these, but you have brief descriptions of what is Brooks High School, a little bit more about it, a little bit more about the history and the background. Same for University Hospital and all of the sites, right? And again, you'll start in the apartment block. Bosch Gardens is a little bit different. It does not have a specific map. It's more like a labyrinth. So you're going to roll on what room and what you're encountering at Bosch Gardens, which is a little bit different than the other sites. The temperature, as we talk about the exploration track, you heard me say a bit about you need to determine the cold factor. So that determines like how cold is it? And you're going to do that by rolling a D12. And that could change due to events or circumstances or things, but in general, what it means is for each 2 points of difference between your warmth and a site's cold factor, you get a -1 to all skill tests. So a difference of 10 points or more means death after the time track resets. So you gain warmth by things like what clothes you're wearing and if you have a torch or not. So those are things, again, that you will track to determine what your warmth is. Peril is a way to scale up and down the challenges of the game. So if your party level is less than or equal to 20, you're going to start at 1, but that will jump up. And that does come into play in certain table rolls. You'll have things that say like a D3 plus P, P being the peril level. So that's what that means. Ambush encounters. So you're going to roll the D6 and determine how many possible ambush encounters that you will encounter at a site. So you're going to do that at the beginning. And if you roll a D6, you can see this table here. It's going to be 1 up to a total of 6. I did clarify with Alex that the intention is that these ambush encounters are always Personae. So they're always these potential creatures that we're going to get into. And you will see a number of different types of creatures here. You're going to see NPCs that we'll get to. You're going to see Personae, which are these monsters that you're going to encounter as you're exploring. And you're going to see Make, which is more the boss of a particular site. So, but these ambush encounters are with Personae. As you explore a site, you're going to decide if you're cautious. You can roll on the room features, room contents. You can search a room. So having a high scavenge skill, because that's what it will take as you search a room, can be important. I believe that the room contents may say outright, hey, you find something, which is cool. But if you don't have a high scavenge skill and you're trying to search the room to find something to help you, you're going to be challenged unless you have a decent scavenge skill. Just something to keep in mind. So room features, again, I'm going to flip through here, but just notice the volume, several sentences of each. There's a lot of detail behind these rooms. And these are all like Bosch Gardens, all of the different sites. I'm going to page down to go through this a little bit quicker. So these are all the various sites, University Hospital, everything that you can encounter. As we go through there, you'll have room contents. So as you roll to determine the contents, you'll have one of 3 outcomes. Either it'll be a discovery, and you can roll on those tables, and you might find something crazy, very interesting. If you watch my first playthrough, then you can see kind of what I encountered in the first couple of rooms. You might have an event, so something that happens, or an encounter. I'm going to flip past these again because I don't want to spoil too much. So encounters, if you do roll on an encounter, it's going to be one of 2 types. 70% chance it's going to be a Phonos, which are abominations that roam around Riverside. Or you might find another lost soul. And these NPCs are not necessarily bad. They might be aggressive, they might not, but you can potentially use them and they can help you. In addition to a typical NPC, you can find what are called Dramatis Personae. Those individuals those are like key NPCs, right? If I think about, I always go back to D&D, I apologize, but if you think about like it's a key NPC that they really can help you, you might encounter them more than once, and they have a progression to them that I won't get into to spoil them, but because I haven't really looked at what happens, but I know that as you encounter them further and further into the game, it does change what they may, how they could help you. They might ask you to do something, give you a little bit of a quest, as I understand it. All right, the devouring. So if you recall, as we went through the time track, you might not have seen it, but I briefly mentioned it. But at times, as you go through that time track, you're going to fall into something that's called the devouring. And as the devouring it approaches, you're going to see a bright light that's extremely intense and searing to your eyes, and you'll feel like you've passed out. And then as you wake up, things are going to be totally different. And that's why you have two different maps. So what might have been some rooms on one map might just be nothing on the new map. It might be a solid wall. It could be anything. I try to avoid spoilers myself, but it's going to be totally different. And it's going to be much more challenging. The ground is going to be covered in rotten leaves and dead animals, foul stenches, all kinds of things. I think of Stranger Things when I think of this, that you somehow flip into the upside down. Not exactly the same, but something like that. So each 3 full cycle, the devouring will descend for an entire cycle, and other things will happen during that cycle. If you are unfortunate enough to die while the devouring is active, you will be burdened with some form of taint. The effects of taint are permanent. So they will affect you permanently as long as you're alive, or I guess as long as, even if you come back, I believe. All right. So these are the types of taints. Let's not spoil that. Room features of the devouring, so things will change. Very cool. You have ambiance, noises, general features. Just don't want to spoil that with you, but you can see the level of detail in this, which I think is super cool. Side exploration. So the exploration track marks your progress. I'm drawing a lot of analogies. This reminds me a bit of D100 Dungeon. So in D100 Dungeon, as you defeat monsters, you progress on a track and you might get more benefits. It's just a way to track, not necessarily your character progression, but a little bit. So in this case, as you clear sites, and you're going to clear sites more than once, but each time you clear a site, you get a milestone for that site, and it goes up by 1. So in this case, the first time I clear any site, so I've gone through it, I've beaten the Make in that site, then I get a new talent. And so I guess this does say roll on the talent table. So by the game mechanics, you would roll. If you want to pick, it's up to you. You can pick. And once you reach a 10 with that site, you erase your progress and start back. So I'm not sure if there's ever a prototypical ending, but you can keep replaying these sites and facing more and more monsters and maybe finding more Dramatis Personae, etc. Your nemesis and the nemesis track, hence the Resident Evil or Silent Hill. Gosh, I'm sorry if that's Resident Evil or Silent Hill that I'm thinking of nemesis. But your nemesis is a twisted version of yourself, identical in capabilities, and they track you throughout the game. So again, another thing you're going to track, but they slowly but surely follow you. And when you face it, you have to treat it as an enemy with your same stats, talents, and gear. But it always has 1 more wound than you do, wins initiative, and you suffer -2 when you attack it. I have not gone and faced this yet. I don't know how I would ever defeat my nemesis. So something to keep in mind, but this is the track to track that. Investigation track. Once you decide what site you're going to explore, you'll need to mark your progress on it. And each time you clear a room, you add +2 to the site's investigation track. Once you've decided you've explored enough, you can try to invoke or I guess conjure. But basically, you're going to try to see if you find the make. And you're going to do that by performing an investigation check. You roll a D100, and if you get a result that is lower than the site's current investigation track score, then you have successfully investigated the site and found the make. What's important about this is, let's say your track is at 60. If you roll a 60 or less, you found them. If you roll above that and you fail, you receive 2 wounds and the make appears. So you do not want that, given you start with 3 wounds. So you'd still face it, but you'd face it at a very diminished capacity. All right. So puzzles, you might find some puzzles as you're investigating a room, and there's some mechanics behind that. Non-player categories, or characters, excuse me. So again, 2 types, 60% chance you're going to just get a random NPC when you encounter them, 30% chance you're going to find a Dramatis Personae. So there are tables to roll on to determine attributes, gender, age. I don't think they're all necessary, but if you want, you can make this a little more specific, this NPC. And you're going to determine, there are some things you do need to determine, like they will have a reluctance stat, and that is deducted from your roll when you might be negotiating with them. So if you face an NPC, and there's all kinds of tables for names and impressions and how they're feeling, disposition. So when you're dealing with an NPC, once you know the basics about them, there's several things you can try. You can request aid. So if you're hurt, the NPC might be able to heal a wound with you. You can trade an item, ask for assistance, and they'll follow you around for a certain number of rooms and help you. You can try to share information. And I think we'll have to look, but I think you're rolling on your persuasion skill, and then it's modified by them, their disposition, etc. And I'm not sure if you roll against their reluctance. I don't want to stop here and pause it, but you're basically rolling, or I keep saying basically, you're rolling on your persuasion to determine whether or not you're successful on these. NPCs in combat, it's possible that they do become aggressive and competitive, and these are all the mechanics around that. They could attack, they could roll combat maneuver tables and other things. Dramatis Personae. So I will flip through them quickly, but I don't want to spoil those, but they're a unique type of NPC. They have personalities, and they're not just random. They have unique behaviors, and each time you meet them, you're going to hear something new about them. And as you move to a new room, you will, once you've met them, I think you'll roll on the behavior, and you kind of track them almost like a wandering monster once they've come into the game with you, once you've found them. They can be fought and they can be killed, and they can only suffer 1 wound before they die. When they die, they return at the start of the new cycle. So this, again, I'm going to flip through. I don't want to spoil, but there's dialogue. There's specific things that happen for each Dramatis Personae, and I believe that they're specific to each site. I think there's maybe 1, I believe, for each site. I love this picture. This reminds me a bit of I Am Legend as well, but I love that picture. Encounters and terrible foes. So you're going to encounter different enemies, as I mentioned. The more common are phonoi or phonos in the singular, and the rarer and more the boss monster are the make. This talks about the types of details, descriptions, wounds, bleed thresholds that can get stacked on, attacks, special attacks. And when you first meet a phonoi, the start of an encounter, and again, if you want to make the game easier or harder, you could certainly just determine that, hey, they're all going to be easy, they're all going to be hard, but what you're supposed to do at the start of each encounter is roll a d10 and determine how difficult they are. And if it's easy, it's just, hey, their normal profile. They're advanced, there's more of an elite monster. You can add 1 to the rune or the attack, or a hard, I guess that would be a super elite, and you'd add 2 wounds and +2 to their attack. There's also a modifier that you would roll on, and to see if they've been warped further. So they can be quick, they can be brutal. And in this case, I believe you're supposed to roll every time. So they're going to have some type of modification, but it's your game. So determine how you want to input this, if you want to make it easier or simpler. The actions, this goes through and this is a way that it's not just, hey, they attack. They could attack. They could use a special ability. They could fall back. So depending on the number of wounds, changes their action. So I like that there's a little bit of flexibility, or not flexibility, but a little bit of variability. So the monsters, there's 10 different Personae you can encounter. And I'll just read one. I don't want to spoil them all, but one is an Ashen. A massive eyeball hangs suspended from the ceiling by a thick tangled web of nerves, veins, and muscle. Where the iris should be, a massive jaw lies open, a thick tongue languidly rolling back and forth as the eye hunts for food. Now, what I did, and you can see this in the playthrough I did, is I actually put those descriptions into AI, and I created my own version of these monsters. Do whatever you want. Theater of the mind, if you want to just envision them as how they might be, or I thought it was pretty cool to see what AI would develop. And I liked the images I came up with, but do whatever you want. But then this explains the different statistics they have. Okay. Let's see. Let's scroll down through further. So again, 10 different types. Some of these are super powerful. And ascended form, I don't recall. I probably scrolled past it, but it says the first time you defeat an ascended form of one of the enemies, you gain certain talents. So I don't know how that happens. It looks like some of them have ascended forms, some of them don't. So you'd have to look at what happens and how they take on, I suppose, their ascended form. So Make. So each Make is unique and can only be found at a specific site. And these are, again, the boss monsters of the site, and they do have certain effects. So I won't, again, the same kind of thing. So I don't want to spoil these too much, but you can see the specifics. I did the same thing in AI, and I basically found an image that I thought would work for them. So I don't want to go through that in detail. All right, starting gear. So you do start with certain gear: flashlight, batteries, rations, bandages. There are some things you start with. Talks about slots and how many pockets you have and things of that nature, and item sizes and crafting. So to craft items, you require the Soul Forge. It's a strange mystical device that appears in your room. Based on your level, there's different benefits. God, that reminds me of so many other games, video games. That's super cool. So when you achieve the appropriate level, instructions appear on how to build that forge. So it looks like at level 5 is when you first unlock the Soul Forge, and it does cost things like Neme. And so it looks like you have to get to level 5 before you can start crafting. And it talks about ingredients and how you make certain things. I don't know if you have to roll to determine if you figure out what the type of crafting is, but I'll let you discover that on your own. Advanced crafting, scavenging table. So again, each room, you don't have to scavenge it. If you do, it's going to cost you time on the time track. And only if you're successful will you be able to find certain things that are on this scavenged items table. Clothing and armor. So the importance of clothing, and you do start with some clothing, is it provides you warmth. So if you have sandals, 0 warmth, but it does give you a bit of armor protection. Tennis shoes, some warmth. There are work boots, cowboy boots, and all types of like combat shirts and things. So various items that you might find as you explore. Instruments of harm. So you do roll, and I might have already passed it, but to begin the game, I recall that you roll once on the weapon table. I'm pretty sure to determine what the weapon is. And based on your weapon, it could be small or medium, that has certain effects. And it also has damage effects. So it might daze the creature, which you go back and look at the condition to determine that. So there are various melee weapon types. I think I rolled on this table. I remember getting a wrench. I don't remember if it's on a special table or, there's the wrench. So I think you'd literally roll on just the table and determine what you get, I think. Ammo, you might have ranged weapons and ammo. And while you're in your apartment, you can build various shrines to Protogenoi. To build a shrine, there are different mechanics and supplies and things that will cost you, and you get certain benefits by building these shrines. So there's a lot of depth to this game. I think we're through a lot of the game now. This is the Darker Secrets table. I don't want to spoil that, but look how deep, how many of these there are and how detailed they are. So that's the game. So I know that was long. I believe that was probably over an hour, or just at an hour. A couple things I want to finish with, and then we'll end this video. Let me go up to the top. So I want to show you. So again, you will get certain items from the PDF, certain tools. You can go to Alex's website to find them. I created a form fillable character sheet using his character sheet. It already, and I'll post a link to this, and I've made it available for free, but you can again put in all your skills. There's drop downs, like what day of the week it is. As you get further into your cycle, so as you get to your third cycle, the devouring triggers. And I did make a note, sorry, you can't quite see it because my banner is in the way, but if you look underneath this table at the very bottom, if you download this, you'll see that the torches and batteries again last one full cycle. As I mentioned, even though it shows 3 on these, you only have to take it off once. And I have put in the starting inventory in here. You start with rations, medical supplies, jeans, warmth, some of those things. So I put that in here. So that's that. I would encourage you to go to Drive-Thru RPG. Let me unhide for the second. Or hide. Should say, I can find it, the background. There we go. And what I wanted to do, and I screwed that up, but if I can possibly, maybe not. Huh. Oh, sorry about that. So Black Oath Entertainment, like I said, very prolific writer. You can see, I don't know why it doesn't show. Okay, it does show I own the Valerian Codex. I bought Nathalis, which is a great solo RPG. I've done a little bit of playthrough on that. Under Ashen Skies, Valerian Codex is a supplement and enhancement to Nathalis. Sacrifice, I've heard a lot of good things about. He's got all kinds of games. So I would encourage you, go to Drive-Thru RPG. If you buy something off of Amazon or somewhere where you don't get some of the PDFs that you've seen that are like supplements, go on his Discord and he will get them to you. He's great about that. Okay. Let's summarize here. Pros and cons. So I'm going to characterize these as potential pros and potential cons, because to me, it depends on the type of player you are, if this is going to be relevant to you. So why is that giving me, I wanted to keep the background, and I want to take this off. There we go. Let's just leave that up. All right. So I love the atmosphere and the uncertainty of your character and learning about the character. I still don't know what to expect regarding my character, and I really like that. So to me, that's a potential pro. You could say it's a potential con. Lots of detailed tables to discover. I love the thematics, and I love the atmosphere, as I mentioned. And I talked about this throughout the review, but I like that some of the mechanics are similar to video games. You have the potential to respawn if you die, but you can still die. To me, that's important. It's not just, hey, I'm just going to play through this. There's no potential, but you do have some ability to just not die outright the first time, which I like. Potential cons. You don't have a real ability to customize a lot of your character. You can add skills and talents, but most of those are random. So that's why I'm calling it a potential con. If you really want the ability and you really want to create your own character, you might not like this game as much as I do. Also, this may not be the best game for you if you are new to solo role-playing. I don't want to discourage you from getting into it. And if you do pick up the game because you like the atmosphere, I would encourage you to scale back. Just don't track everything that you're supposed to track. Don't add the enhancements to the Personae. All of the things that it has you do, just eliminate some of them. Make it easier on yourself. You're still going to have the discovery and, in my opinion, the excitement. So for those that are solo or veteran solo gamers, they're probably not going to worry about it as much. They'll create what they want to use. They'll use what they want to use, and I think it'll be great. For tables, again, a lot of tables, which to me is kind of part and parcel of a solo game. But if you don't like that randomness, and there may be times, I think I might have found it once or twice, when you're rolling on a table and you're investigating something, it may not make 100% sense. In my mind, all that means is you just adapt it a bit to fit your situation. So I don't think that's a huge issue. So in summary, no bones about it. I love this game. I love the genre. I'm enjoying playing it. I'm going to start playing this on Wednesday nights on my Twitch channel, and I'm going to do it alternating nights because I want to play some other games, but I love it. So go to Alex's website, Black Oath Entertainment, go to his Discord channel, get to know him a bit. Great, great guy. And that's it. I really hope you like the game. I will take some time, and it might take me a bit. If this video is just published and you don't see the timestamps, probably because I just haven't had a chance yet, but I will add the time stamps, I promise. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you made it this far, thank you so much. And hit that follow button if you're interested in the content I have, and hit the like if you'd like to see more videos like this. Till next time, have a great time gaming, everyone.